Now, I have read, page after page after page of testimonials of Jews to Pius XII, thanking him for saving the lives of the Jews of their communities. In Italy, the Jews were persecuted, but they were not deported until Germany occupied Italy in 1944. And then a great mobilization took place to save as many as possible. There were some 7,000 hidden in the Vatican and in 180 other places in churches, convents, hospitals, schools. Convents of cloistered nuns were ordered to take in married couples. For hundreds of years, no man had set foot in their monastery. There were 50,000 Jews in Italy in 1939. Another 16,000 Jewish refugees arrived during the war, and of all these, only 8,000 were finally captured and deported by the Nazis. So it was the lowest percentage during the war. Now, the Nazis knew that many were being hid, but they weren't silly, of course. And the Germans are not, they're not stupid. So they knew that the Vatican was hiding these people, but they didn't want to risk breaking with the Vatican. So the Jewish community in Rome asked the Pope not to issue any public condemnation for fear that that would move the Nazis to break into these monasteries and to collect and arrest these people. At one point, the Germans demanded 50 kilos of gold from the Jewish community of Rome within 24 hours, failing which the whole community was going to be deported. And so they had to try and find this gold, and Pius XII offered to make up what was missing using sacred vessels of the Vatican. And in recognition of this, the Jews wanted to place an inscription in the synagogue in honor of the Holy Father. At the end of the war, the chief rabbi of Rome, his name was Israel Zoldi, he converted to Catholicism and he took the baptismal name of Eugene, the Pope's name, in gratitude for all the Pope had done. There's a lot of internal Nazi documentation that came out after the war to the effect that the Church's propaganda against the persecution of the Jews was hurting their cause in public opinion. From all the countries where deportations are taking place, there are complaints by the Nazis that the Church is turning public opinion against them. So the Pius XII had instructed all of the bishops of Rome to do whatever they could to help those who were being persecuted. And there's a Jewish historian named Pinchas Lapide. It's one of the first books. And he wrote this, I think, in the 60s. He's got a book called The Last Three Popes and the Jews. And he is not a fan of the Catholic Church. He goes through the Middle Ages in the Church, and he has some terrible things to say about the Church. But he's a Jewish historian, and he estimates, he spent years going over all the archives, and he estimates that the Catholic Church saved 820,000 Jewish lives during the war by all that they did, getting them out, hiding them. He went through this very systematically. He's not a fan of the Catholic faith. He lived through the Holocaust. He was in the British Army during the Second World War. When the war ended, there was a great outpouring of gratitude to Pius XII from the international Jewish community, and that was renewed on his death. For example, Golda Meir, who became Prime Minister of Israel, she says, "When fearful martyrdom came to our people in the decade of the Nazi terror, the voice of the Pope was raised for its victims. The life of our times was enriched by a voice speaking out about the great moral truths about the daily conflict. We mourn a great servant of peace." And that was on the death of Pius in 1958. Dr. Joseph Nathan, who was the head of the Hebrew Commission, he says, "We thank Pius XII and the religious men and women who, executing the directives of the Holy Father, recognized the persecuted as their brothers, and with great abnegation hastened to help them, disregarding the terrible dangers to which they were exposed." And during the war, Albert Einstein wrote the following: "When all others had abdicated their responsibility, only the Catholic Church stood squarely across the path of Hitler's campaign. The Church alone has the courage and the persistence to stand for moral freedom." I could go on and on. Right? This stuff, there's pages and pages of it. On May 26, 1955, the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra went to Rome to play for the Pope in gratitude for all that he had done. And I'm going to have to stop here. So there's maybe a little bit more. Now, so the accusations, the accusations against the Pope are clearly unfounded. And as we see, a public condemnation wouldn't have done any good. It would have been counterproductive. Should he have been more forceful and less diplomatic? Well, you can debate that. You can debate whether his policy was really right on. But certainly, it's clear from everything that he had the interests of the Jewish people at heart, and he was doing all that he could, that he felt he could, to help them. In 1998, the Vatican issued a document called "We Remember," a reflection on the show of the Holocaust. And it points out that Pius XII saved hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives. But it also admits that whereas many Catholics heroically risked their lives to save the Jewish lives, many others did not muster up the moral courage to do so. And I think this is the funny thing here. There is a real debate that could be held, a real conversation over the role of the hierarchy in Germany, the role of the Catholics there. Did they do enough? How did they react? There you've got much more room for debate. Many Catholics, as Pope John Paul II said, did not muster up the moral courage to do so. And so that, I think, is a legitimate debate, but it's not being held. Nobody seems to care about that. They're concentrating on Pius XII, and he's the wrong target, because he actually is not blameworthy for anything. That document says that also there's a long tradition of anti-Judaism in Christian countries, based on religion and not based on race. And the document asks the question, was the Nazi persecution of the Jews made easier by the anti-Jewish prejudices embedded in some Christian minds and hearts? And it tends to answer in the affirmative. So it's probably true. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, including in Germany, before the Second World War. There's a long history of that. And you can't deny that. And the people, they looked upon the Jews with a certain envy often. They're a minority, they're a successful minority. Oftentimes they're in business, and so there's a lot of envy there. And so when you have a successful minority that does not want to integrate, then you can have jealousy. And there was that, and that probably facilitated Hitler's election. He had an anti-Semitic program, among others, and he was elected on the anti-Semitic program. So yes, there almost certainly is a debate that could be held there, but no one seems to want to engage in it. There is an industry of books coming out, as I said, on these subjects. I'm for and against. Every year there's a new book or two books written. It's just an amazing phenomenon. Rabbi David Dallin and Joseph Bonham, two scholars, the first one, of course, being a Jew, they've written a book called The Pious Wars. And in that book, they look over all that's gone on here, all the different scholarship, all the books that have been written since that time. And they point out two things. On the one hand, on the substantive issues, the defenders of Pius have won clearly, and they've got much the better argument. But on the propaganda war, they've lost it. And the people still think that Pius XII was anti-Semitic. And the reason for that, basically, is because the books defending Pius XII are published by the Paulist Press, our Sunday Visitor, Ignatius Press, and the ones attacking him are published by Harper and Row and Doubleday. So there's, they do this huge propaganda machine. They sell thousands, hundreds of thousands of copies, whereas the Catholic books defending the Pope, they don't manage to make their way into these big publishers. And so most people, the only side of the story they get is the story attacking Pius XII. So it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So in summary then, the attacks against Pius XII, they're not well founded. That's known by serious historians, but the popular press continues to feed the image of the silence of Pius XII.